Hi everyone, this is Elizabeth at craftsbyhappystamper.com. Thanks for joining me today. Today I'm featuring a card that I made for the Can You Case It design team. This week we're doing a sketch challenge, and you can click on the link in the description box if you decide to join me. I decided to do some Copic coloring today, which I don't always do, but I love it, so I decided to do some of it. So I'm stamping my grape bunch that says thanks a bunch in Memento Tuxedo Black ink. I messed up the first time, so I have to do it again. I just didn't get good coverage of the Memento ink. And now I'm just stamping that. Because I'm going to want to cut this out with a circle framelit later, I wanted to make sure that I gave enough room on the left and the right side of the stamped image in order to cut it out later after I color it. So I'm going to speed through some Copic coloring. I'm just doing some very basic Copic coloring. I started with the V25 marker, and I'm covering all the berries with it, just trying to saturate it with one layer right now. And I am using, my darker color is V28, and I am using Stampin' Up! Whisper White's cardstock in order to do this coloring on. I find that it works very well. I know that you have to have somewhat of a lighter hand. If you have a very heavy hand, then the Copic ink will just bleed on the page if you put a ton of ink on it. But if I flip this over, you could see through it. It saturates the paper just like it would with Neenah Solar White cardstock or with the Express It Copic blending paper. But it works for me. I don't have a terribly heavy hand. In fact, sometimes I have to make myself go over and over and over again because my hand is so light. So then with the leaves, I decided to use YG63 and YG67 as my two colors. And after I saturated with my lightest color, I went back with the darker and just kind of outlined some of the veins of the leaves, as well as adding some shadow underneath the banner. I'm not going to worry about coloring the banner because you'll see later I decide to emboss the sentiment again in gold and fussy cut it out. But you could see me adding some shading here, and then I'll go back with my lighter marker. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. I'll go back with my lighter marker and blend it out a little bit better. Excuse me, I'm sorry for that. So for the little bit of stem that you see here, I'm using E44 as my color. You could use two colors, but it's such a tiny area, I decided that it didn't really need extra shading uh, with another color. So I then used a circle framelit in order to cut out the sentiment piece or my focal panel, and I'm just using some scrap Whisper White cardstock to stamp the top part of the grape bunch in Versamark ink, which I'm sort of off camera here, but you wouldn't be able to see it anyways because it's clear ink. And then I'm using my gold embossing powder, and this is also Stampin' Up! Embossing powder, which I really like. It's my favorite one. I think it has good fine details, and I like the shade of gold that it is. I mean, if you do a lot of gold stuff, then you know there's tons of shades of gold, but I really like the shade of gold of the Stampin' Up! I'm sorry I'm a little off camera here. I obviously was not paying close enough attention, but I decided to use some gold thread, metallic thread, and kind of like wrap it around in a crazy fashion to put behind the banner that I'm going to pop up with dimensionals. And hopefully pretty soon you could see me making just kind of like a messy circle of metallic thread there, but hopefully pretty soon I will be back on camera. Any second now. I'm sorry for that. There we go. So I used a glue dot in the very center, and then I just twirled the gold thread around that and stuck it with the glue dot. And then I put dimensionals on the edges of my banner and in the center of the banner to help hold the gold thread down again, and uh, use that to place the sentiment strip that is embossed in heat embossed in gold in the center. So for my card base, I decided to use Elegant Eggplant, and I cut it at 5.5 by 8. I mean, yeah, 5.5 by 8.5, and then scored it at 4.25. And this wood panel has fast become my favorite piece of Designer Series paper. It's from the Farmers Market Designer Series paper in the annual catalog, and I cut it at 4 by 5.25. And right now I'm like trying to see how it looks with the sketch. I'm trying to see, does it need its own purple mat? What can I do to kind of spruce this up? But my next largest circle framelit seems huge in comparison to the one I used to cut out the original focal panel. So I'm really struggling with what to do in order to mount it. So I decide that the best thing would be to have a little bit of a gold outline around the outside of the focal point. So because I already put it all together, it makes it a little more difficult, but I just scraped the edge of the circle across the top of my Versamark pad to get a little bit of Versamark on the edges, and then I lightly dipped the edges and twirled it all around in my gold embossing powder. I didn't want to sprinkle it on top because I've got the dimensional and the glue dots and all the coloring and no anti-static stuff on any of that. So I didn't want to sprinkle gold powder over the whole thing. I just wanted to dip the edges in gold powder. And then I'm heating it with my embossing gun. And it actually took me quite a little while to do this because the lighting in my room at this when I made this card wasn't great, and I had a really hard time telling if it had melted or not on the little corner. But when you see the close-up later, I think it really makes a huge difference. See, now you can see it's a subtle difference, but I think it's a big difference that helps make the focal point pop. Now, if I hadn't already glued down my hard wood grain DSP, I probably would have just tucked this around the back of that, but I already glued that down. So I decided I wanted to add this ribbon, and I'm wrapping it around the entire front, and I'm going to glue dot it underneath where that focal panel is going to go in order to keep it in place. But that way, when you flip the card open, it will just be a single, solid piece of ribbon. It will still look pretty. You won't have like a messy back if I just glue dotted it on each side of the back of the front of the card base, right? Does that make any sense? I'm sure it does. Anyways, so it's a little difficult for me to manipulate the ribbon and keep it, make sure it's flat and straight on the back, and I'm cutting it all to the right size and then glue dotting it in place, which you can see me sort of doing now. I need to get better at making sure when I zoom in that I'm completely on camera. I'll work on that. All right, so I decided that after I got my ribbon on my card base that I wanted to pop up the entire focal panel with Stampin' Dimensionals. So I am liberally applying the dimensionals all over this circle focal point that you see here, and I'm getting ready to attach it to the card base. And because I don't have very long nails, sometimes that takes me longer than it should. But there you go. Now this is an extremely simple card. It just has a few little extra embellishments. I added a few little gold sequins after the camera was off, and the little gold touches of the gold ribbon and the gold outline on the focal point and the gold sentiment, I think, really make this pop. This would be an easy card to do in a class, or a card that you could make a bunch of, and it's fun to take some time to color, just relax and color. So I hope you like this card. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed already, please do so. If you want any of the details or the supplies, they're in the description bar. And click on the link in order to get to the blog post and join me in this fun challenge. Thank you.